In this room
I have a joy to announce, to add to all of this, and that is that it was 22 years ago today, November 11th, 1990, that I was ordained to the ministry. So I'm celebrating, and I want to give a shout out to my partner Bob, who's the only one who ever remembers this, and he always gives me a big bouquet of flowers, and they're on our dining room table right now. Two things about that. One is this tie I wore on that occasion of my ordination, and the other thing is that I had a statement that I had written for the congregation which ordained me, which I would like to present to you now as a prayer, as a prayer for what I would like to see happen here in this wonderful congregation. It goes something like this. Let's get together and let's make a deal. Everyone who is willing to take an almighty risk, let's get together and propose a stunning bargain. a daring contract for the world to see and to hear, a human drama unfolding. Here it is. There is meaning in the world, and human beings can participate in that meaning. And that's the gospel. That's the gospel news. There is worth and dignity within and among us, individually and together. And when we congregate, true community is possible. And even more, our relationship extends beyond the doors, all the way out to the whole world, to the cosmos, in an amazing interdependent web of existence. This is a cause for celebrations. Let us get together and talk about this. Let us sing spiritual songs and clap our hands and dance dances to the living rhythms of the earth and the air. There is so much to experience, so much to learn, so much to hope for. And if we join together, the odds begin to multiply that we'll get in on the ground floor. And this is powerfully inviting. As the circle enlarges, the numbers can't keep pace, and the group is larger by leaps, bounding. Life is the issue now. Being itself, the heart of the matter. We come together hungry for that which energizes us and empowers us, that which inspires the cosmos, the spirit of all movement, all goings and all comings, to life. It is an eternal grandeur. It is an eternal and spectacular variety. It's eternal and engaging mystery. And we are drawn to these truths. We are seekers, exploring these things with other seekers. And look at this. We have come to know that there is more stuff in the search than there is at its end. The congregation allows for this. It encourages, it fortifies, it offers a needed space. It puts down a clean tablecloth ready for the supper to be laid out and served. What exciting possibilities they are. This is a sacred commission. And all this is the greater because we require it. Yes, we recognize that amid the abundance, there is nevertheless something amiss, some kind of wound. There is pain in the world, and we feel it in many ways. We perceive a lack, an incompleteness, a sense of brokenness. We do not fully understand this, although we theologize about it incessantly, but we marvel at it all. And this is yet another reason to gather ourselves. Somewhere along the way, we feel intimately the commonness of this hurting, and our tears and our loneliness and our separations may be of the same substance of whatever it is that we have in common. Our life, its ebb, its flow, its daytime and its nighttime, all of this is universal. And together we recognize this mystery. And so it is that we learn the lessons that love teaches, as in the ways of Jesus, to love one another, even our adversaries. The glorious tradition of prophecy, as from the Hebrew prophets, still compels us to proclaim the requirements of justice in an unjust world. The ancient myths inspire us. The great revered stories teach and empower us. The language of the past often urges us into the future. And our own traditions of reason and of freedom and of tolerance give us roots in the consciousness of human dignity, a time-honored wisdom. We were not born yesterday. The holy is real. The responsibility exists. That which is sacred is that which dwells within us and between us. And in our living, breathing bodies gives us a splendid access to the inviolable, the incorruptible. The spirit and the flesh are made one, unitary, universal. And our actions and our words finally are one. Our ministry is the living epistle, which is nothing more than the manner of our everyday lives. Religion is not a philosophy. It is a life. It is a career. And in this life, at our best, we can be forgiving. We can also be for trusting, for loving, as well as forgiving. We can unite to give strength to the weak, to give relief to the suffering, to calm the fearful, to visit the lonely, to love the unloved, even when the weak ones, the sufferers, the fearful, those who are alone, and those who are unloved are none other than ourselves. May these things be true, and may these things be blessed. Amen. We're running way late, and that's because I have a difficulty in keeping my mouth shut when I should be paying attention to the clock, which, by the way, has been fixed and is actually the right time now. So I'm going to truncate the sermon today. Actually, that was a sermon right there. And also the prayer was a sermon. So you're not really getting, you really are getting your money's worth. And we'll see more clearly about that when we take up the offering, which comes after the sermon here at Live Oak. And I've never been in a place that did it that way, but it does give you a chance to kind of evaluate the sermon. And yeah, it's worth a little bit there. Yeah, I'll give it to you. I'm coming today with a metaphysical problem. My lifelong study of religion and religious thought from around the world, and especially in regard to Christianity, reveals that there is a bottom line message in all religions. And I'm sure you know that. The message is love, that sweet, sweet spirit of love. And it seems to me that all the great spiritual writers and prophets and saviors say that in the final analysis, love is what it's all about. My problem with that, I believe that, I think it's a great idea, but my problem with that is that I have trouble applying that wisdom to my daily life. Please know that I do not want to follow, that I really do want to follow the advice of the great prophets, and I want to love everybody. And I love all of you. I always love people. I really do. Some people I don't like, but there's a difference between loving. Loving is like a broad thing that you can just throw out to the world. And I've heard this from many of you right here at Live Oak, and certainly from the people who comment on these things out in the world. Love just doesn't always work so well in the real world. For instance, we have heard from the ancient texts, love your neighbor as yourself. Right. That's a pretty easy thing to do, right? Unless, of course, you don't love yourself, and there's nobody here that knows what I'm talking about with that. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's a pretty easy thing. But not unless you've had some neighbors like I've had over the years. People who were very unneighborly, and therefore it seemed to me to be unlovable. Now there's the command of the Sermon on the Mount, which says, love your enemies. Yeah, right. Now there's something really easy to do. Yeah, I'm going to love the very ones that are out there trying to persecute me, to defile me, to kill me. Sure, let's just love everybody and everything will be okie dokie. Now, more specific to the next door neighbor idea, how can anyone love the guy who once lived behind me in Seattle, whose dog barked at me for around 23 hours a day? How can the Samaritan traveler, remember the Good Samaritan story? How can the Samaritan traveler love the Jew he found lying on the side of the road, having been beaten by robbers, when the Samaritans and the Jews were cultural and religious enemies of that day? Why is he called the Good Samaritan? Love your neighbor as yourself. And who is your neighbor? That was the question that was asked, and it's up to each of us to answer that question. Nowadays, the word love has been so overused and undervalued, even cheapened, that it no longer holds the kind of powerful meaning the prophets must surely have had in mind. Love nowadays has turned into a Hallmark card sentimentality, and nowadays some folks need insulin injections just to overcome the sugary effects of the cards that are sent out. A little overstated, but that's, yeah. Maybe it's time to rethink this thing, and I've thought at times perhaps we ought to place a moratorium on the word love, since its meaning has been so misused. In the Greek language, there are 4 words that we translate as love. There's epithemia, which is sexual love, sensual love. There is eros, which is a hunger for fulfillment, for completion. There is philia, which means friendship. And then there is agape, which is the love in which you give of yourself. In English, we only have one word, and it's just not enough, and what's worse, it's not accurate enough. At least the Greeks realized that there's a very large dimension to this thing called love. As I considered this subject, I tried to turn to the wisdom which is out there in the world. And don't you know, the first place I landed was with the Dalai Lama, the great Tibetan Buddhist leader. And I found many books that he had written. You know, the Dalai Lama won the Nobel Peace Prize back in 1989. And if anybody should know about loving one's neighbor, surely a Nobel Peace Prize winner should. And those Nobel Peace Prize winners should have a good definition of what it means to love your neighbor. So here's some history about the Dalai Lama. The 14th God King of Tibet was born in a cowshed in the tiny farming village of Takhtar in 1935. A cowshed, which is something like a manger. At age 2, he was designated as the reincarnation of the Buddha. And he was taken to the holy city of Lhasa to be reared in that fashion. By the age of 7, he was receiving envoys from President Franklin Roosevelt and leading prayers before 20,000 watchful monks. In 1950, the Chinese army attacked Lhasa from 8 different directions. In March of 1959, when a bloody confrontation seemed imminent as 30,000 steadfast Tibetans rose up against Chinese rule, the Dalai Lama slipped out of his summer palace dressed as a humble soldier and set off across the highest mountains on earth. 2 weeks later, the holder of the White Lotus rode into exile in India. And after these 40 years of exile, he remains kind toward those invaders of his homeland who have killed over 1 million of his people and destroyed over 6,000 Buddhist monasteries. His way of responding to this terror was what he calls the policy of kindness, in a manner remarkably reminiscent of another prophet named Jesus. He responds to evil doing with goodness and kindness. He says, whether one believes in a religion or not, and whether one believes in rebirth or not, there isn't anyone who doesn't understand and appreciate kindness and compassion. This is my simple religion. There is no need for temples, no need for a complicated philosophy. Our own brain, our own heart is our temple, and the philosophy is kindness. Here's the prayer that he says every day. For as long as space endures, for as long as living beings remain, until then I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. To dispel the misery of the world. Now that's a mission statement we might want to consider. And I recommend a new word that we can use in the place of love, and the word is kindness as a noun, to be kind as a verb. Speaking love this way as kindness solves so many of the problems. You don't have to figure out what to do in any given situation, either with your loved ones or with your enemies. It's hard to figure that out when you're using this very nebulous concept of love. But when kindness is your religion, all you got to do is respond to whatever with kindness. Can you imagine that? Can I imagine that? Can I imagine doing unto others what I would have them do unto me as a mission statement, as a covenant, as a way of responding to the world? Long ago and far away, up in San Francisco, an event happened that caused a sizable blip in our cultural history. In fact, this event may not have actually happened, but as we know, all legends and all myths are actually true. There is a toll bridge between Oakland and San Francisco called the Bay Bridge, and in those days, I think the toll was $1 or maybe $2. One fine day, a woman went through the booth and paid her toll, and then quite unexpectedly and certainly contrary to the ordinary behavior of the thousands of commuters who drive that road every day, gave the fellow in a toll booth another $1 saying, "I want to pay for the car behind me." A gift to someone she didn't know and didn't even deserve it. It was a random act of kindness. The toll taker was astonished and told his supervisor about it, and somehow the story got out on the news services. In a matter of days, drivers all over the country were duplicating that woman's gift-giving act. It was spreading across the nation, random acts of kindness. And why did this happen? Why were people willing to give gifts to people they didn't even know and who probably didn't deserve it? Why would you do such a thing like that? Why would I do it? Well, the answer mostly has to do with the fact that it actually feels good to do that. We've heard that it feels good to give stuff away, like casting your bread upon the waters. And of all things, acting toward others with kindness brings a curious, tangible feeling of goodness, and that is simply true. One day when I was living in Berkeley, I decided to test out this theory. So I went down to the ATM and got out $100 in cash. And then I went down on Telegraph Avenue, which any of you who know Berkeley knows is greatly populated by panhandlers and people with their hands out and pans out and cups out. And I started giving the money away. $1 to that guy, a fistful of dollars to that guy over there, the guy that had a mangy dog sitting next to him. And I just gave it away. On and on I went. And even though the rational side of my mind reminded me that you're not supposed to give money to panhandlers because they'll just go out and buy liquor and just drink it up. But I didn't care because I was thrilled by the act of giving it away randomly without any reason or rationale and with no regard to the consequences of it. You mean there could be consequences to being nice to people, to being kind to people? So maybe you should try that sometime, or maybe you shouldn't try that. But better yet, maybe we should try that way of living. That even if you don't know the person, and even if you don't know the consequences of what you would give to that person, and I'm not talking just about money, I'm talking about giving of yourself to somebody by being kind and by being good toward that person. What would it be like to live? What would happen with living in that kind of way with the idea that it might spread? Just like that woman who paid for the guy behind her. Imagine spreading this kind of giving away, this kind of random act, this kind of random way of living when your religion is kindness. I think I know what the hardest part of this formula for me is, and the hardest part is in that phrase that says, love your neighbors as yourself, in which the Dalai Lama might say, be kind to your neighbors even as you are kind to yourself. Because the hardest part is that tag end of that, which is sometimes I realize I'm not being kind to myself. I'm not giving love to myself. It's one thing, for instance, to forgive other people. It's a whole new ballgame to try to forgive myself. Y'all don't know what I'm talking about now. And that brings up that whole big thing about forgiveness, and we're going to talk more about that over the time that I'm here. But I want to emphasize the point that the big element of being kind is forgiving yourself of your assumptions of what that person is that you're being kind to. When you see the person on the street sitting beside a mangy dog with his hand out, my first thing is to make judgments about that person and say, I'm not going to give anything to that person because I know what he's going to do with it. What's really happening is I can't forgive myself for having that view of the world. And that's just one example. It happens all the time in everything that we do. Am I going to waste my kindness on somebody that doesn't deserve it? Am I going to waste my love for people on people that don't deserve it and that maybe I don't even know? Just like being kind affects both you and the person you're being kind to, forgiveness affects the person you're forgiving, but it really affects you, the one who is forgiving. And that's the way this formula works about kindness. And the other auxiliary idea that the Dalai Lama had, which is about compassion, defines it in the dictionary that sympathy with suffering of others, including a desire to help, It comes from Latin words literally meaning to suffer with. When you have compassion for someone, you are sharing whatever they may be suffering, be it emotional, physical, or spiritual. And that puts a whole new light on the golden rule, which reminds us of our total interdependence with one another. As always, the words from the Dalai Lama inspire me to want to do good things in my life. And so every day I say, how can I do that today? How can I be a good person today? What does it mean to be good? What does it mean to be kind today in my life? And when we come together in this beloved community, this is what we're really talking about. What does it mean to be good in the world? Good to the world and good to ourselves. Good to those around us in the community and good to those who are not here, who are absent, who are somewhere else in the world. How do you live that every day? That is the main topic of conversation right here in this congregation. I invite you to have a little bit of lunch right after this service and then stay around noontime. We're going to gather in a conversation salon. That is, we're going to figure out how can we be good to one another and to ourselves. And how can we fulfill this marvelous promise, maybe a mission statement, which says, my religion is kindness. May these words be true, and may they be so. Amen.
In this room today, and I know that it's the Spirit of God.